Hello friends, this is Petradot with tip number 4 of a 7-part series on how to grow a fantastic Bible study life. If you haven't seen the first 3 videos in this series, please be sure to check them out. And now let's get into Bible study tip number 4, study the Bible in context. Have you ever had a conversation with someone, but later on you found out that they took one sentence or phrase out of your conversation and made it seem like you said something that you really didn't say? How was it that they were able to spin the meaning of what you said? Simply put, they took it out of context. Context is basically the situation in which something is said, done, or written that gives it its real meaning. When it comes to the Bible, the context is made up of the verses that come before or after the passage that you're reading. They help explain the situation that's surrounding it, and it helps you to understand the author's train of thought and help you understand what he really meant. Understanding the context is super important because misunderstanding the meaning of a passage can cause us to misapply it in our lives, as well as when we teach others from the Bible. If we don't understand the context, we can share wrong information with them. Many people don't realize that one verse or passage outside of its context can say or mean something completely different than when it's read within the context of the chapter or even the whole book that it was written in. Because of this, it's super important to realize that we cannot build a doctrine or a teaching on one verse alone. We need to compare the passage that we're reading with the verses or the chapters that come before or after it. In this way, we can get a better understanding of what the passage is trying to say to us. Now let's look at a memorable example of this found in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1. Here, Paul plainly says that it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Outside of the context, it seems that Paul is saying that men shouldn't touch women at all. But when you read the verses around this text, you'll see that he's actually referring to a man avoiding intimacy with a woman that's not his wife. So it would be wrong to say that Paul commands men not to touch women at all. Do you see how important context is here? Let's look at another example. This example is taken from the book of Numbers, and it's the story of the Israelites when they were traveling in the desert after their freedom from Egypt. They were on their way to the promised land, but before deciding to go in, they sent 12 men to spy out the land, to check it out. 10 of those men came back with a negative report saying that there were giants in the land that would prevent Israel from taking the promised land. The report that they gave completely discouraged the Israelite congregation. They all began to complain, and they even wanted to stone Caleb and Joshua to death. And because of their reaction, God said he wouldn't allow any of that generation to enter the promised land. But there was an exception. It's found in verse 24. Let's look at that. But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit in him and has followed me fully, I will bring him into the land where he went, and his descendants shall inherit it. Now, if we stop reading right here, it seems to plainly say that only Caleb and his descendants will be able to be in the promised land. But if that's your conclusion, it would be wrong. Reading down just a few verses, we see more of the context. In verse 30, we are told that both Caleb and Joshua would be able to enter into the promised land. But you would have to read the full context to see this. A good way to understand a verse or passage in its context is to ask ourselves several questions. These questions are: who is being spoken to? What problem does it refer to in this passage? What other statements surround this verse? You can also ask yourself the 3 questions found in Bible study tip number 3 in the previous video in this series. After grasping what a passage means in its context, then we can correctly apply it to our lives today. As you read the Bible, let it speak to you. Let it interpret itself. The Bible is not just the truth, but it is actually the test of all truth. So it's important to interpret it in its correct context. We are told, make every effort to present yourself approved to God, an unashamed workman who accurately handles the word of truth. If we want to accurately handle the Bible, God's word, we must be sure to study it in context. Well, we are making our way through this series with only 3 more Bible study tips to go. So be sure to look for those videos on my channel. Thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, take care, God bless, and Maranatha.